everyone, and welcome back to the 2017 Pokemon Video Game International Championships here in Indianapolis, Indiana. My name is Evan Latt, and believe it or not, I am joined by my friend Adam Doricott here at the desk. Adam, welcome to the finals.
I am so excited for these finals. I sat down and watched the top 4 matches, and it's another one of those finals where we actually have a player from North America playing against a player from Australia.
Another one of those finals?
We've seen 2 of them already, and it's not quite gone in North America's favor so far, so I think they may be looking to try and set the record straight with the hopes for that relying on Paul Chua, but with Christopher Cam, his brother's already taken one home. Christopher really wants to make this into a family affair and secure the 3rd title for Australia here in Indianapolis.
It's really exciting. Australia really came out of nowhere to really dominate this tournament so far in both the seniors and the juniors division. And for an Australian player to make it into the finals here at our first ever international championships is a huge moment for this region that has been steadily improving over and over again throughout these years.
Yeah, it's been very, very quick growth, I think. And after they didn't manage... I know they did have the winner, obviously, come from Australia. Then their top cut was very heavy, I think, with players coming from other regions, looking to set that record straight. They're looking to be that region to take 2 of the international championships, the only region that would be doing it in this year. This is, of course, the last one. But Paul is going to be the hope for North America, trying to keep things in-house, should we say.
It is 4th of July weekend here, so it would just seem appropriate if the player from the United States of America could satisfy the home crowd here and really take a strong performance and a win home for the United States of America that kind of needs one this season.
I think they do. You know, they obviously went to Latin America, and we saw Ashton won it for the region there. Latin America aren't able to try and claim that international title at this final hurdle. But they've both come through very, very grueling top 4 matches. Very impressive play from both of these players as they come towards the end of the run, and nobody wants to slip up at this very, very vital time.
Absolutely. It is Championship Sunday, and that means finals. And it's been a long weekend of Pokemon, and we are at the end, the final match of the weekend. And it's going to be an incredible match. We have some incredible players who are looking to join the pantheon of, great players out there. One of these tournaments, like an international championships, it's not quite Worlds, but it's very close.
Well, these tournaments have really kind of stepped up the quality of play, bringing players from around the world together to play on a slightly more regular basis. I think has added a new level of competitiveness to it, but both of these players that we see here for our finals are no strangers to the big stage. Of course, Christopher, a former world champion in the trading card game. That was a number of years ago, but still, you don't lose that kind of golden touch when it comes to winning when it matters. And Paul, 4 years ago in this very hall, actually winning a national championship here in 2013. He's another one, not afraid of the stage in the slightest.
Yeah, and very exciting. Both of these players had their biggest successes as seniors. So that was, when Christopher won his world championship. I believe that was when he was in the seniors division.
Certainly was.
Paul won his national championships when he was in the seniors division. Now both masters ready to take on all comers. And this finals could not be more exciting to me. I'm not going to wait any longer. Let's go down to the stage. Let's meet our competitors.
Guys, this crowd doesn't want to wait any longer either, do you? No. We are so ready to find out who will be our North American International Champion, and I have your finalists in the Masters Division of VGC for you right now. Please welcome, from Australia, Christopher Can! And his opponent, representing the United States, Paul Chua. Gentlemen, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you and learning from you this weekend, and now it comes down to this. Let's find out who will be the champion. Please take your seats and let's get into this match.
Those are our players sitting down at the desk. On the left, Paul Chua, representing the United States of America, has this rowdy crowd a little bit behind him, it sounds like, adapting the Australian chant for nefarious purposes.
How dare they at this finals?
So rude!
Of course, Christopher does come with his own chant. I've seen it up on Twitter alongside the Play Pokemon hashtag.
Yes, we can.
Very good wordplay for those of you who decided to come up with that one. But there is, of course, a bit of a hometown crowd. Just all of North America will be looking for Paul. But as I said earlier, Chris definitely looking to round things out and take another one home for Australia. Really bring some pride to that region to come all the way over here and stake their claim as one of the best.
Yeah, it would be such an incredible achievement for Australia to sweep the entire tournament here. Juniors finals, seniors finals, masters finals. That would be so unprecedented for a region that's so far away to have come to this tournament here and then take all of the titles. But if they want to do that, they will have to get through this man, Paul Chua, who we just saw win his top 4 set in 3 games. Regional champion this year, top 8 worlds in 2013, as well as a national championship there. The team that we just saw being piloted in extraordinary fashion in our last top 4 match, Garchomp, Ninetales, Tapu Koko, Arcanine, Celesteela, and Snorlax.
Well, he's been very, very good across this whole format. And while he came towards the end of the season and this very important internationals, which he did have to perform at to secure a day 2 invite at Worlds, taking a complete pass on day 1, the team he's constructed has been a little bit up in the air, I think, for him. He was talking about it before the tournament, saying he wasn't feeling too great about it on social media. But obviously, it's worked out for him. A couple of choices on here. The Ninetales. I know a number of people didn't think it was a premium Pokemon as we approach the tail end of the season. And it clearly seems to be doing great work with the Aurora Veil. The Garchomp holding the Choice Scarf, another one that a lot of people may have overlooked, doing fantastic work and being so essential in his top 4 match.
Yeah, I love your mentioning of the Garchomp. Scarf Garchomp is one of those Pokemon that a lot of players talk about as a best of 1 trick. That's a Pokemon that only works in a best of 1, and oh, I can't believe I lost to Scarf Garchomp. It's, it only works that 1 game and it'll never happen to me again. But Paul's in the finals here with that Scarf Garchomp, and we saw in all 3 games, in that 3rd game especially, in our last top 4 match, that Scarf Garchomp is putting in work.
Well, Garchomp is the MAC Pokemon, but giving it a Choice Scarf just makes it even harder to handle. There's so many things that you think are going to be safe switch-ins to it. Tapu Koko would usually be great against it, trying to hit it with a Dazzling Gleam. And not only does he keep it safe by actually moving before the Tapu Koko and trying to knock it out, we also saw the Wide Guard on Celesteela in that previous game. Now, while he doesn't need Wide Guard to protect himself from the Earthquake, keeping the Garchomp safe from a Dazzling Gleam could be so essential if he manages to work that in at the right turn.
Absolutely. We saw how disruptive that Wide Guard was in the last match. Paul's going to need to do that again as he faces off against his opponent, Christopher Can, representing Australia here. 2-time regional champion this season. His little brother just became an international champion. Chris is going to try and add another one onto that now crowded family mantle.
It's another one of those families that do so well. We've seen them down the years. And obviously the Can family are the new ones to try and take over these tournaments. An interesting team coming out from him here of Snorlax, Porygon 2, Tapu Koko, Arcanine, Gyarados, and a Garchomp of his own. The one thing I'm very interested in is, of course, the Gyarados.
Yes, having these double intimidators we've seen over and over again in some of our Swiss matches and in our elimination rounds, having the different options of which intimidator to use depending on the matchup, or even bringing both, especially when you have a Pokemon like a Scarf Garchomp that can't easily switch out or change its moves and boost that attack like a Swords Dance Garchomp.
Well, that was really interesting to me, and we saw in Paul's top 4 match, the one way that Cesar was trying to get back against him was working the Intimidates in. Arcanine is the prevalent Intimidator in this format, but Christopher looking a little bit outside that box, bringing the Gyarados, which is actually a fantastic Pokemon to use against Garchomp for, multiple reasons. It's the flying type, so it doesn't get caught by the Earthquake on the switch-in. It intimidates Garchomp, lowering that damage output, and it does often carry an almost answer. Sometimes it carries Ice Fang. I don't know if Christopher's is going to be that way, but even the fear of it, if Paul hasn't played against this team, is certainly going to influence his decision-making, as we saw him in that previous game putting a lot of eggs in the Garchomp basket in the same way some people do with the Snorlax, which both of these players have and I'd like to see match up. But the way we saw Garchomp going in the top 4 match is something he needs to think about. A very quick lock-in when we get to team preview.
Yeah, Paul is absolutely ready to get into battle. He is fresh off of his win in top 4 and doesn't want to let anything distract him or knock him off his game, which he was so clearly on in that final match. Christopher taking his time, going to figure out, using all of this turn 0 time, this team preview time, to set a game plan. You know, both of these players likely thought about what this matchup would entail once they got into game, but now all of that theory goes out of the window as we're headed into game 1.
Yeah, you've got to get the leads right. It's such an important thing to make sure you have the momentum coming into an important set like this. Now, the best way to get momentum would be to get a very good lead, an advantageous lead that you can build off over and over again. There are, of course, options for safe leads that we see from players, but this is one of the leads that I believe Paul loves to use.
Yeah, Paul opting for the Ninetales and Tapu Koko will match up against a Arcanine and Garchomp. Ninetales very happy to see a Garchomp on the other end of the field, immediately threatening it while probably being able to get a free Aurora Veil up.
Well, that's the interesting thing when Paul leads with the Ninetales. Of course, he puts it in the front, and just the presence of Ninetales alone forces Christopher to play a little bit conservatively with that Garchomp. If he switches it out, it's only the Arcanine that can try and do something to answer this Ninetales, but it's still going to be moving after the Aurora Veil. As we look down Christopher's team, we do see there are none of these other weather-setting Pokemon, the ones that set the weather with their ability on the way in. So Ninetales is always going to have control of the weather with this hail coming from the snow warning. That means Aurora Veils are going to be available pretty much whenever Paul wants them.
Well, if Paul wants it, he has a chance right now. Tapu Koko protecting itself. Ninetales, though, just going straight for the Blizzard onto that Garchomp, surviving with that Assault Vest, able to really tank that hit and fire back with a Poison Jab, dealing lots of damage right back to that Ninetales, and the Flare Blitz from Arcanine going to pick it up. Paul going for the Hyper Offense at the start, not using Ninetales to boost his fellow Pokemon, and instead, Paul loses that Ninetales and does not get the Aurora Veil up.
Well, this is a very interesting turn from Christopher. Of course, it looked, if you were in Paul's position, like he was maybe going to try and switch out the Garchomp. Interesting that he didn't go for the Aurora Veil when it looked like a fairly safe time. He thinks he's going to be able to get a knockout on Garchomp, and in most cases, he would be right. But Christopher's item becoming immediately apparent, the Assault Vest boosting the special defense, really helping out. Not only did Garchomp not switch or protect itself, but it just goes to the attack, showing one of the attacks it's chosen with Poison Jab. Obviously going to be super effective against the Fairy type of Ninetales. Really worked out for him. An early advantage opened up for Christopher. We talk about getting off to a good start, and I certainly think that a lead like that is probably going to help you out, probably make you feel good going into the rest of this game. But Snorlax is going to be a little bit harder to knock out than something like a Ninetales.
Yeah, Snorlax definitely going to need some extra turns to start being more effective, though, especially without that Aurora Veil. Tapu Koko, though, will just go for that Gigavolt Havoc, using its Electrium Z on that Arcanine. Going to try and get that Pokemon off the field. If Paul is going to start setting up that Snorlax, he does not want that many Intimidators out there to neuter the power of the Snorlax. Gigavolt Havoc into the Arcanine here with the terrain, with the extra damage from the Blizzard, enough to pick up the KO there. Paul fires right back, knocks out that Arcanine. Garchomp goes for another Poison Jab here, will connect with the Tapu Koko. Poison Jab dealing a lot of damage, not enough to pick up the KO, while Snorlax is starting to set up the curse. And that Poison Jab is doing a lot of work right now. One of those moves that Garchomp likes to have, but usually can't fit. But on one of those Assault Vest Garchomps, you have the extra space.
Well, what we're seeing here actually is Christopher maybe slightly missing an opportunity. When you look at the way the field is, the Tapu Koko is likely going to be targeting down that Arcanine. It can't do too much to the Garchomp. Outside the Dazzling Gleam, you think Garchomp likely to protect or switch out because it doesn't have access to protect with the Assault Vest. You know, I think Christopher almost missed an opportunity to accept that the Arcanine was going to get knocked out by the Gigavolt Havoc, and then get an Earthquake off, maybe deal with this Tapu Koko. Of course, the amount of damage you put down with Poison Jab is nothing to ignore. That basically means that at the end of this turn, if Tapu Koko is still in play, the Hail is going to get rid of it. Curious to see Christopher bring in the Porygon 2 right now, though, especially with a Snorlax on Paul's side.
Yeah, well, Tapu Koko just going to get some extra damage with the Thunderbolt Dragon Claw coming out from that Garchomp, dealing just a little bit of damage back to Snorlax as well. Porygon 2, of course, wisely deciding not to go for that Trick Room with a cursed up Snorlax on the field. Another Facade coming out from Paul, dealing a little bit of damage to the Porygon 2 as Hale picks up the KO on that Tapu Koko. Bringing in that Porygon 2, maybe signaling that Christopher also has his own Snorlax in the back. But with Paul's out on the field, it's ahead in curses, and it's about to heal up all of that damage with this berry.
Well, Paul maybe just trying to do something with the Tapu Koko before it got knocked out by the hail, of course. Very smart play, I think, from Christopher to just try and get some damage down on the Snorlax. Even without the benefit of Aurora Veil that I think he's used to in these calculations, it's certainly a little bit harder. But you do notice he's still taking damage from the Garchomp, and Paul not using Dazzling Gleam, I think, for fear of the switch on the Garchomp. Yep. Christopher being very, very bold, letting this Garchomp stand its ground and try and get some damage out every single turn.
Yeah, but crucially, Paul has a free switch in for his Scarf Garchomp. He'll easily pick up the KO on the opposing Garchomp. Porygon 2 will survive, and actually he critical hits his own Snorlax.
That's huge damage.
Snorlax taking a lot of damage thanks to that critical hit, ignoring the defense boost, and the Ice Beam picks up the KO on the Scarf Garchomp. Nowhere near as bulky as the Assault Vest Garchomp on the other side. The Facade will pick up the KO onto Porygon 2 finally. So Paul will have this Snorlax. It has already used its berry, so will not be able to heal again. That critical hit damage, if Chris does have his own Snorlax in the back, that could be huge. And actually, it's the Tapu Koko, so it's even huger.
Yes, it's one of these Tapu Koko coming in without the Trick Room. One-on-one, Snorlax probably not going to have the opportunity to even work in a Recycle just because of the significant amount of damage that we do see from these Tapu Koko, especially while it's in the electric terrain.
And there's that forfeit.
Yeah, Paul just conceding this match. This is one of the downsides, I think, of running the Scarf Garchomp, is that you actually don't have the option, you know, to Tectonic Rage, which is single target. Catching his own Snorlax with a critical hit was absolutely huge there. And that damage just made it so he knew whatever came in next was going to be able to get the knockout. Yeah. It did go to the final Pokemon for each one, though, and that's information that Paul can take through. We've seen him make comebacks before, and knowing all four of the Pokemon that Christopher selected, interestingly enough, the Porygon without the Snorlax, and no sign of that Gyarados to try and deal with Scarf Garchomp. That's something he's going to be able to consider and think about when he comes back into Team Preview.
Yeah, absolutely. As we head into Team Preview for Game 2 now, that Scarf Garchomp was so close to clutching out the win there for Paul. Have to feel good about your chances in this game too as well. Just coming up a little bit short on the KO on the Porygon 2, and of course that critical hit on your own Snorlax. Either one of those things goes a little bit differently. You may just be able to figure out a way to turn that around from Game 1. So
I think he'd have preferred the critical hit on the Porygon 2 rather than the Snorlax. Yeah, would have been a much preferred target. But the one thing I noticed and would like to touch on before we get into this game is that Paul didn't do the same kind of thing he'd been doing in top 4, which is actually protecting Garchomp and Snorlax with the Aurora Veil, with a partner Pokemon like Celesteela in Garchomp's case. So that change of strategy may be something he looks to do again. With this pairing on the field from Paul, Ninetales and Snorlax together, you have to think that he's going to be going to try and set it up for safety with Aurora Veil. And interestingly, a change of lead from Christopher too.
Yep, new leads coming out, the Snorlax and Porygon 2, so Christopher has decided to actually bring the Snorlax this time, but it is countered by Paul's own Snorlax and the Ninetales once again. So as we've seen, Paul does not have a Trick Room option, opting instead to use the Ninetales to protect the Snorlax out of Trick Room. But Christopher has brought his Trick Room mode here.
It's a very awkward decision when both the Snorlaxes are on the field together that you actually want to try and set the Trick Room up to benefit your own Snorlax, but you don't want to help your opponent out in the slightest. Paul's going to try and help his Snorlax out a little bit differently, as we do see Trick Room is not going to be the option from Christopher this time.
Nope, Christopher instead opts for an Intimidate off onto the Snorlax, trying to make sure that Paul would lose a Snorlax curse race if it came down to it. Also easily takes this Blizzard into the Arcanine and a little bit of damage onto the Snorlax on Christopher's side as well. Paul does opt to go for the curse here on his Snorlax, so getting another boost to defense and evening out the attack drop from the Intimidate. And it looks like Christopher's actually just going to go on the offensive, using that Facade onto Ninetales. It's a 2-hit KO, so getting some good damage off while Paul decides to start boosting up the Snorlax.
Paul is going to be investing in the Snorlax. It would shock me if we didn't see the Aurora Veil this time to keep those defenses exceptionally high, especially with two physical attackers on the field. on Christopher's side. Trying to get a little bit of damage down with Blizzard isn't too bad at all. Knowing about the speeds, of course, on Christopher's team, only the Tapu Koko outspeeding that Ninetales. So he knew without the Tapu Koko in play, he definitely had time. There we go, trying to keep Snorlax safe as houses.
Yep, got that free Blizzard off and now gets the Aurora Veil anyway, and Christopher showing that Toxic on his Arcanine, toxicking the Snorlax, going to make sure that even if Paul is going to be able to keep the curses going, it'll be on a timer. But of course, we've also seen Paul reveal the Facade in the last game, so Paul now is going to have a boosted up Facade as it starts getting these curse boosts.
I think that's a really interesting trade-off from Christopher here. He obviously wants the Toxic to start dealing damage to Snorlax, and it does that without having to worry about the changes in defenses from both Aurora Veil, reducing damage by 30% in this double battle format, and of course the 2 curses boosting it by 2 stages, so a lot of pretty much physical defense investment on this Snorlax now.
Yeah.
Of course, Poison does a percentage health damage. It's very, very effective. But when you're boosting Snorlax's damage from Facade, its key attacking move, especially after 2 curses, you've got to make sure you have the switch-ins to take that comfortably. And I wonder, is there anything that can actually take that comfortably?
Well, Porygon 2 is pretty bulky. It switches in, is going to take a Blizzard for its efforts alongside the Snorlax, and the freeze actually coming out from the Blizzard. The damage onto Snorlax just enough to activate the berry there, but Porygon 2 frozen in mid-air. Christopher trying to get some damage off onto Paul's Snorlax with that Facade, but with those defense boosts and the Aurora Veil not doing much of anything at all. High Horsepower also dealing a good amount of damage to the Porygon 2, all things considered, but frozen up. Porygon 2, if Chris just wanted it to tank some hits, it could still do that.
It certainly could. You know, it's going to be able to come in and take these hits. Of course, not going to be able to do anything in between taking hits while it remains frozen. And the Ninetales on Paul's side seems very, very comfortable to just keep on attacking.
Yeah.
Of course, the Arcanine switch in, which is likely to try and get the Intimidate down on this Snorlax, try and mitigate the effects of that Curse boost, would be a good switch in as it takes the Blizzard very, very comfortably. But of course, you don't want to be taking damage for free every single time you switch in. Arcanine's one of those things you really want to keep safe.
Absolutely, and we are going to see the Snorlax switch out for Arcanine. Christopher needs to get that Intimidate down to prevent the Snorlax from going out of control, which is just kind of leaving that Ninetales up and available to use these Blizzards. The Snorlax is so threatening right now, Christopher has to play around it, but that's just letting Blizzards go off. Porygon 2 frozen again, Snorlax finally using its fully boosted Facade onto Arcanine, enough to pick up the one-hit KO on the switch.
Well, you see just how much damage that Facade does there. Helping him out by poisoning him is really rather annoying.
Yep.
And of course, the poison damage from Toxic increases every single turn, but it's still so far away from leaving Snorlax
I think that
in a
Snorlax can
position.
win in those turns.
It really can. It's so far away from a position where it can deal with it, especially with the damage mitigation from Aurora Veil. That's going to help out when this Tapu Koko comes in, because Snorlax hasn't boosted its special defense, but it's still going to be able to really help out a little bit. Porygon 2 being frozen, of course, is a bit of a bother for Christopher, but he really needed to get a little bit more. Switching Arcanine in, somewhat predictable, I think, from Christopher's side of the field. And Paul capitalizes absolutely fantastically by catching it with a Facade on the switch.
Christopher's Tapu Koko that just switched in, actually going to go for the Ninetales finally. A Thunderbolt onto the Ninetales finally picks up that KO. Porygon 2 still frozen. Another Facade connecting with Tapu Koko, not enough to pick up the KO. And Ninetales' Hail has dropped. Snorlax taking a lot of damage from that poison. Will need to start recycling, or it'll go down to the poison and another attack. But you know what? Paul has Garchomp in the back.
Well, I think for this one,
Pretty good matchup for that Garchomp
yeah,
right
the
now.
Garchomp's in a fantastic position.
Just don't crit.
Outspeeding the Tapu Koko is going to be lovely. Doesn't want to crit his own Snorlax. Doesn't
Again.
really want to hit his own Snorlax. Because if he does hit it with the Earthquake, it's very, very likely. And Porygon 2 wakes up, may be able to capitalize and try and get a little bit of damage down. Tapu Koko doesn't even want to gamble on getting hit with this Earthquake. Something a lot more comfortable at taking these hits coming in for Christopher.
Ooh, it's not even going to be an Earthquake, it's just going to be the Poison Jab coming out from Garchomp. Paul maybe still a little worried about that first game. Not using the Earthquake here, just going for the Poison Jab onto what is now a Snorlax. Porygon 2 still frozen, finally gets finished off by that Snorlax's Facade, and that Toxic is dealing so much damage, and now finally the Snorlax is within KO range. But Christopher has no other way to play around this Scarf Garchomp.
Yeah, the Tapu Koko isn't going to be given the opportunity to make a move in this instance. It is going to be taking the Poison Jab from Garchomp, obviously, because of the Choice Scarf on the Garchomp. The Snorlax is Christopher's only hope, and Paul's just going to have to play smart with this Snorlax if he wants to keep it around, to basically try and get a recycle in. With Tapu Koko protecting Snorlax, the only thing for Christopher to try and fight back in this game.
Yep, Tapu Koko's protect. The Poison Jab will whiff. Christopher's going to start cursing up his own Snorlax, going to try and match Paul's damage here. Without the Toxic, will be able to continue to just boost itself up and heal up with the berries. The poison from the Toxic will finally knock out that Snorlax that had all of those boosts and all that effort put into it. It deals good damage to Christopher Snorlax, and the berry has already been used, and he'll need a recycle to make that work.
And we see there from Paul, he's got the maximum value out of his Snorlax in this game. Just letting it go down to the Toxic, of course, not a bother. With the last Pokemon on his team being the Tapu Koko, in electric terrain, it's going to be comfortably able to deal with this Snorlax while Garchomp handles that Tapu Koko with aplomb.
Yeah, Paul saving that Tapu Koko for last. Poison Jab into Christopher's Tapu Koko, picks up the KO. Paul will be able to also target down this Snorlax. Curse can boost your defense and your attack, but it can't save you from this Gigavolt Havoc coming up. Paul with this Z move on Tapu Koko, gonna knock out that Snorlax and force it game 3.
Yeah, Paul just stamping his authority on the game by revealing his Z
Style.
moves. Yeah, really getting those style points as he rounds out the game. But a lot better, I think, from Paul in this game, getting the Aurora Veil and so much value out of that. Of course, taking the Toxic and getting more damage from Facade. Very, very helpful if you're Paul. You want to be dealing maximum damage every single time. And with Facade, if you're not afflicted by a status condition, you're not actually able to deal the full amount of damage it could. So maybe Christopher has to think twice about Toxicking Snorlax.
Might be an adjustment you might want to make, but it sounds like our American crowd has woken up with Paul Chua's victory in that second game. Well, has some fans in the crowd. Paul's going to need their energy to carry that through into this game 3.
Yeah, it's definitely got the momentum coming into this because of how convincing that win in game 2 was. There are, of course, the reverse sweeps. It's not so big in a best of 3, but coming back from 1 down and winning the back 2 is such an accomplishment. And once you come into game 3, you've got to be feeling good. I do have to look at Christopher's team and wonder why that Gyarados isn't making an appearance. Maybe he's terrified of the Ninetales, potential for pretty good damage with Blizzard, and if it carries Freeze Dry, even more damage. Something he's clearly a little bit concerned about. We saw the adaptations from him, but that wasn't going to be one of them.
Yeah, really interesting decisions for Christopher to make here. He actually locks in first, I believe, for the first time this set. Paul taking his time a little bit more, and Christopher had a very good game 1. Will need to replicate that if he's going to become the North American International Champion and complete the sweep for Australia. Game 3, here we come. Paul Chua on the left, Christopher Kahn on the right. United States of America versus Australia. The winner of this game is our new champion.
Well, you referred before the game to Choice Scarf Garchomp as a best of 1 Pokemon, and this International Championships has actually come down to a
best of 1.
Best of 1. Yes, they have a lot of information going into it, but this last game is the deciding factor in the final International Championships of this season.
All right, and things have been switched up again. It's going to be the Arcanine and Porygon 2 for Christopher this time, and the Snorlax and Tapu Koko for Paul this time. I'd like to see what this Porygon 2 can do with, now that it's had a nice little rest. Maybe it's thawed out a little bit, got its body temperature up, did some jumping jacks or something.
Yeah, Porygon 2 chilled out a little bit for that last game.
A little too chill.
Just a bit. And then as we come into this final game, you know, he sees the Snorlax from Paul in the lead. Seeing that Snorlax is going to make him think twice, of course, about setting up Trick Room, even if he has his own Snorlax in the back.
All right, well, it looks like he actually has Tapu Koko in the back, so Christopher retreating Arcanine. The Intimidate onto Snorlax is a job well done. And actually, the Gigavolt Havoc coming out immediately from Paul.
Yeah, something he wants to remove from play. Doesn't want to be messing around, doesn't want anything to be sticking around on the field. Wants to get that key advantage in turn 1. The Gigavolt Havoc in the electric terrain does a preposterous amount of damage.
It's the Tapu
but
Koko.
the Tapu Koko switch in from Christopher.
Oh,
is
so much damage.
That is
so close.
It's clinging on with an absolute sliver of health. Porygon 2 is free to try and retaliate, but this Tapu Koko is actually working out for Christopher just by clinging on.
Just a little bit of health remaining on that Tapu Koko on the switch, and Porygon 2 dealing a good amount of damage with that return to the Snorlax. Got that download boost, I believe. And Paul, he even has the supercharged Gigavolt Havoc using the Thunder instead of just the Thunderbolt version.
Yes, his does a little bit more.
Oh, but Paul goes first.
That's so important, these Tapu Koko. We know that Christopher's is a very fast one because it's one of those event Tapu Kokos, and losing out on that speed tie is going to give the first Pokemon advantage to Paul.
Yeah, Paul able to knock out that Tapu Koko before it can do anything but take that Z attack. Take that Z move, the return coming out from Porygon 2 dealing good damage back, but Paul is content to start setting up that Snorlax.
Well, at the moment, there are going to be very few things that can get through that Snorlax. This Porygon 2 isn't exactly known for its really high damage output. The Arcanine's trying to help out a little bit, of course, by bringing the Intimidate and making the attack part of the boost from Curse not so useful, but the defense part is going to be so valuable, especially if Christopher has got his own Snorlax in the back. Really, any of his remaining possible Pokemon aren't going to appreciate those 2 stages of increased defense from Paul's Snorlax.
Tapu Koko protects itself on Paul's side, doesn't want to take an extreme speed or a flare blitz. Instead, Christopher's just going for the Toxics. Feels comfortable enough with the 2 Intimidates that he has gotten on Paul's Snorlax. Thinks that he can survive the full power facades here, but Paul's just going to keep boosting his Snorlax. Now back to 1 stage of increased attack plus the full power facade now. Going to be slowly taking damage from that poison, but again, we saw in game 2 just how much havoc that Snorlax could wreak before the Toxic became significant.
There's so much riding on this Snorlax right now. Really needs to be sticking around, and you do have to question if Christopher has something that could reliably take a knockout. Of course, if it lets it stick around, there is going to be the activation of the berry, even with just the damage from the poison between turns. Christopher doesn't want to get hit by one of these full power facades, though.
All right, Tapu Koko's Thunderbolt targets the Porygon 2, not the protecting Arcanine. Christopher will recover. Looks like his plan right now is to just stall, and try to get those Toxics to start adding up. But Paul predicting, oh my gosh, all of that damage from the full power facade, more than 50%. That makes the recover basically useless as an option here for that Porygon 2.
It didn't even get to recover the full amount. Only brought itself back up to 100%, was already above 50. And this Porygon 2, pretty handily dealt with, put back in its place by this Snorlax. We do see the berry activation, so it's sitting again at just shy of its full amount of health.
Sitting only 4.
Yeah, the Arcanine is certainly going to struggle here. And very smart targeting from Paul to predict the protect on Arcanine and not follow up with an attack into that slot.
All right, well, Tapu Koko's Thunderbolt isn't enough to pick up the KO onto Porygon 2. Christopher trying to get some damage down with that Flare Blitz, but 3 stages of defense boost, the Flare Blitz and the Porygon 2's return just not doing the damage here. Snorlax, though, will focus the Porygon 2, so Porygon 2 does go down. And Paul and the Americans in the audience are very happy about that. That Pokemon potentially threatening the Scarf Garchomp in the back. If Paul has decided to bring that, could be setting up for that win condition.
Yeah, that pretty much will seal up the game. We do see the Snorlax come out from Christopher, but his is a little bit behind the pace.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's down in 3 curses, as you talked about before. The race to set up your Snorlax, Paul has comfortably won that. He's got the curses in play. There's no special attacks and no reliable way to try and deal with this Snorlax now. It's likely going to be able to work in a recycle if it's not. And at the same time, the Tapu Koko, even without the electric terrain, is going to be able to start working on things, going to want to get that back, and Paul showing he did bring the Garchomp to this game.
Yep, Paul did bring the Garchomp, will get Toxic for its troubles on the switch-in. Not the worst thing to have happen. Gets to avoid any kind of Intimidate thanks to all of the work that Paul's other Pokemon have put in beforehand. Christopher now trying to catch up with those curses. Will is even on the attack front, but nowhere close on the defense front. That is more than 50% damage dealt with that facade. Eats the berry, heals up a little bit there. Garchomp takes some poison damage, and now Snorlax will also take some poison damage. And, getting that one curse is good,
but it's not quite
enough.
No, he's way behind the pace. And even if he manages to slow this game down and level up the curses, he would be ahead in the attack, of course, because he's not been afflicted by Intimidate. He's still going to struggle to get there, and he's not going to be able to do as much damage because there is no status condition to power up his facade. I'll be interested to see what Paul locks in here with this Garchomp. If he goes for Earthquake, it would be doing a lot of damage to this Arcanine. Snorlax would be getting knocked out on this side. It would be even closer because of the defense boost, and that's a calculation that only Paul is going to know. He's usually the one going for it. The Paul Chua special coming out.
Rock Slide deals good damage to Arcanine and a little bit to Snorlax. Gets the flinch. Arcanine not able to get off an attack here. Flinches, but Snorlax able to get the berry off. Paul will go for another facade onto Snorlax, and again, dealing more than 50% damage there. So Snorlax, even though it's recovering with those berries, not actually being able to save hit points.
Well, the chances of Christopher winning this game get slimmer and slimmer with this lock-in from Paul, knowing that it's the Choice Scarf. It is going to be stuck until it switches out, potentially. Trying to get this damage out with Rock Slide. We saw how much it did to this Arcanine. Getting the flinch is absolutely huge.
Rock Slide can miss, though.
It can also miss, but the real problem is, of course, how far behind he is with this Snorlax. You would be interested to see what he does, maybe trying to switch the Garchomp out. Then it'd be forced to come in alongside something.
Right.
I think Rock Slide is probably the premium play, just going to keep going for it. And those potentials for flinches are going to stop his opponent's movement.
No extreme speed or anything, just Rock Slide. Arcanine recovering up its hit points with that berry. Going to be able to take another one of those. Tapu Koko goes for the Thunderbolt, is going to target down the Snorlax, easily the threat right now. And the paralysis, that's going to boost the facade. Arcanine gets the Flare Blitz off. Snorlax really needs a recycle right now. Flare Blitz will be enough to pick up the KO onto Tapu Koko.
Full power facade could be doing a lot of damage, though. It's going to...
gets the recycle off!
It's really
no
big
flinch,
now.
no paralysis. Big moves by that Snorlax.
It's a really good turn to get the recycle off and be able to do more. Obviously, he wasn't expecting the paralysis and didn't think to look for that facade. But if he'd have gone for it, could have been a monstrous play. Now, he is in a position where he needs to probably avoid some Rock Slides, attack through paralysis. But if he can get some damage down on this Garchomp, then he doesn't need to do a full knockout amount of damage. What he needs to do is just get it low enough so the Toxic Poison is going to be doing more. Of course, there's no way for Paul to reset this, and he is stuck using the highly inaccurate, in some people's opinion. Obviously, it's only about 85% accurate, but that seems to be the difference. That 15% chance could be important.
Here comes the Rock Slide, still connecting, dealing damage to the Arcanine and the Snorlax. Not enough to pick up the KO on Arcanine, so this Blizzard from Ninetales will not be full power onto Snorlax, and actually not enough to pick up the KO on either. A critical hit on the Snorlax, though, is a pretty big deal. Arcanine able to get the Flare Blitz off onto Ninetales, so we'll be able to pick up the Focus Sash onto Ninetales. Ninetales hanging on with that Focus Sash. Arcanine knocking itself out with that recoil. Snorlax gets the recycle off again.
Snorlax
no flinch.
Just sticking around, not getting flinched, not getting fully paralyzed. So important.
Paul doesn't have the damage.
It's going to be really difficult. Of course, the hail damage is going to wear down this Garchomp. The Toxic Poison is going to be doing more and more every single turn. All this Snorlax needs to do is just stick around.
Paul needs one turn. He needs a paralysis, he needs a flinch, and he needs it now.
Yeah, he needs something because this Ninetales is only going to be able to do damage with Blizzard. If Snorlax is able to keep hitting Recycle, just eating that berry over and over again, we could see it. We saw how important Snorlax was to Paul. It's going to be big. Of course, the damage increased by the fact that
the Rock Slide.
2 targets.
There's the Blizzard, full power Blizzard this time. Ninetales gets it off. Snorlax is able to get the recycle off.
Another one.
Gets another Agua berry. Eats up that berry. Heals up to 50% health. The toxic ticks down on Garchomp. And Ninetales not going to be enough all by itself. Paul Chua doesn't have the damage. Australia's gonna sweep.
There is the Garchomp with the toxic poison.
Oh, there it goes.
It's been on the field too long. The hail damage combined with the toxic enough to do it. And Ninetales clinging on with one hit has no way, unless Snorlax gets caught by full paralysis every single time, Ninetales is going to fall to the big...
Ninetales will run out of power points.
The big Snorlax that could, sticking around.
Oh, there it is, the facade. Christopher Can of Australia completes the sweep here at our inaugural North American International Championship.
Christopher Khan making it a family affair in the finals. Things were looking tough for him. He was paralyzed. He was getting caught by Rock Slide, but that didn't matter. The coins didn't flip in Portal's favor. He's been known for it in previous tournaments. In his top 8 match, there was a number of Rock Slide glitches, but he used up all of his luck in that match, and it didn't quite come through for him in the final. Chris, with that big smile and sigh of relief, now he is done.
You could just see all of the relief in those eyes right now. I don't know